As I stood at the edge of our village, bundled in woolen layers that had seen better days, my fingers numb from the cold seep into my very bones, the last wisps of autumn's warmth dissipated, leaving an unyielding chill in its wake. The sky was a deep, foreboding gray, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the passing of summer's warmth, the wind whipping it into a frenzy that stung my face like 1,000 needles. I clutched my wooden spoon tightly, its worn handle a comforting presence against the biting gusts, as I gazed up at our small cottage, its wooden beams weathered to a soft silver, standing sentinel against the tempests that howled around it. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, like a ghostly finger pointing to the darkness within, where my wife and children huddled by the fire, their faces aglow with candlelight, while I shivered in the cold, the weight of winter's impending arrival heavy on my shoulders, casting a darkening shadow over our meager. Inside, our fire crackled and spat, casting flickering shadows on the walls as my wife stirred a pot of stew simmering over the flames, the aroma wafting up to mingle with the scent of damp wool and the musty tang of mold that clung to every surface. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and snow. Outside, where drifts had grown deep enough to reach our doorframe, threatening to engulf us whole if we didn't tend to them soon. I watched, mesmerized, as she expertly wove together threads of wool and linen to mend our worn garments, her fingers moving with a precision born of years spent in quiet labor, the dim candlelight casting a golden glow on her hands as she worked. The sound of dripping water from the eaves above us provided a soothing background hum, like the gentle lapping of waves on a summer shore, but even its melody couldn't chase away the sense of unease that settled over me with each passing day. As I worked alongside her, repairing our wooden plow, my thoughts strayed to the long winter ahead, its darkness and cold a heavy weight that pressed upon me, threatening to snuff out what little warmth we'd managed to conjure in this small, drafty cottage. The sun had long since set, plunging our world into an inky blackness that seemed to swallow all light and sound. Outside, the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits, its icy breath seeping through the cracks in our doorframe to chill my skin. Yet within these walls, a warm sense of contentment settled over me, like a mantle of worn flannel on a winter's night. Our small community slumbered fitfully, their dreams infused with visions of springtime and new life. I closed my eyes, feeling the gentle rise and fall of our breathing, the soft murmur of our family's snores a lullaby that lulled me into a state of quiet reverie. In this peaceful world, where work was a slow, methodical dance, and time itself seemed to unfold like a rich tapestry, I found solace in the simple rhythms of our rustic life. As night deepened, the shadows within our cottage grew longer and darker, like skeletal fingers grasping for the last embers of light that danced in the small, grimy window pane. The fire had burned low, casting a faint glow over the room that seemed almost otherworldly in its softness. The flame's gentle crackle was a soothing balm to my weary ears. I rose from my chair, my joints creaking with a familiar ache, and began to prepare for the night's tasks. The slow, laborious process of tending to our meager stores, checking the wooden barrels that held what little grain we had managed to preserve through the harvest season. The air was heavy with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a primordial smell that spoke of ancient rituals and forgotten traditions passed down from my mother's mother. The musty taste of moldy bread and stale ale wafted up from the wooden trough where our last jug of water sat. Outside, the wind howled like a beast awakened from a deep slumber, its mournful cries echoing through the stillness like a chorus of lost souls, the sound sending shivers down my spine as I wrapped a woolen cloak tighter around me, the cold seeping into my bones. As I dressed in the faint, flickering light, my fingers fumbled over the buttons on my leather tunic, struggling to find the right thread to repair the worn seam. The darkness outside seemed to press in around me, a palpable force that made my skin prickle with unease, the wind howling through the barren trees like a chorus of restless spirits, their bare branches creaking and swaying in the biting wind. Yet within these walls, all was calm and quiet, the only sound the soft creaking of our wooden beams and the distant rumble of thunder, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through every molecule of air, like the beat of a slow drum warning of an impending storm. I moved with a practiced ease, my movements slow and deliberate as I worked by the light of a single candle, its flame casting eerie shadows on the walls, the dance of firelight on damp stone making me feel both warm and chilled at the same time. As I worked, my thoughts strayed to the day's tasks, the long hours of labor that lay ahead like an unyielding mountain range. The biting wind whipped my face, its bitter chill seeping into my bones as I huddled beneath the worn woolen cloak draped over my shoulders. Our fields would need tending, the snow-encrusted earth shoveled and turned to coax forth a new crop from the cold, dark womb of winter. I wrapped my calloused hands around the wooden handle of my spade, feeling the familiar ache in my arms as I lifted it to break through the frozen crust of the soil. The sky above was a dull gray, the sun hidden behind a veil of clouds that seemed to swallow all light and warmth. Yet, amidst this bleakness, I found a sense of calm, one that came from knowing that every task completed, every shovelful turned, brought us closer to spring's promise. As the darkness closed in around me once more, I felt no fear, only a deep, abiding sense of purpose, born of the cold, hard earth beneath my feet and the slow, steady beat of our rural heart. As I stood at the edge of the hearth, the air inside our cottage felt like a dense fog that clung to my skin, weighing me down with its oppressive presence. The fire crackled and spat, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls as my wife stirred a pot of stew simmering over the flames. The scent of dried herbs and onions wafted up, a rich and comforting aroma that filled every corner of our small space, like a warm blanket that wrapped around me in its gentle folds. I watched, mesmerized, as she expertly wove together threads of wool and linen to mend our worn garments, her fingers moving with a precision born of years spent in quiet labor, the rhythmic motion a soothing balm for my weary eyes. Outside, the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits, threatening to shatter the fragile peace of our little cottage. But within its walls, all was snug and still, wrapped in the warmth and love that only winter could bring. As I worked alongside my wife, repairing our wooden plow in the dimly lit courtyard, the sound of dripping water from the eaves above us provided a soothing background hum, like the gentle lapping of waves on a summer's shore. The cold, damp air clung to my skin, weighing me down with each laborious stroke of the hammer against the wooden beam. My thoughts strayed to the long winter ahead, its darkness and cold a heavy weight that pressed upon me, making every breath feel like an effort. Outside, the sky was a deep, foreboding gray, the wind whispering through the bare branches of the nearby trees like a mournful sigh. As we worked, my wife's fingers moved deftly over her own repair project, carefully stitching together torn seams in our woolen cloak, her brow furrowed in concentration. The hours ticked by with a slow, deliberate pace, each one a reminder that time itself seemed to unfold like a rich tapestry, woven from threads of wood and stone, soil and sky. As night deepened, the shadows within our cottage grew longer and darker, like skeletal fingers grasping for the last embers of light that danced across the cold stone walls. The fire had burned low, casting a faint, ethereal glow over the room that seemed almost otherworldly in its softness. I rose from my chair, my joints creaking with a familiar ache, and began to prepare for the night's tasks. The air was heavy with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a primordial smell that spoke of ancient rituals and forgotten traditions. As I moved through the darkening space, the thatched roof above seemed to press down upon me, weighing heavily on my shoulders like a physical burden. The wind outside howled in mournful tones, its icy fingers scraping against the windows. But inside, all was quiet, except for the soft creaking of old wooden beams and the distant hush of the forest, a living entity that seemed to be holding its breath alongside me. I wrapped my woolen cloak tightly around my shoulders, feeling the weight of it like a shield against the darkness outside, and set to work with slow, methodical movements, as if time itself had slowed to match the beat of my heartbeat. As night fell, the darkness outside seemed to press in around me, a palpable force that made my skin prickle with unease. But within our cottage, all was calm and quiet, the only sound the soft creaking of our wooden beams and the distant rumble of thunder, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through every molecule of air. I moved with a practiced ease, my movements slow and deliberate as I worked by the light of a single candle, its flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. The chill of winter seeped into my bones, but I wrapped myself in the warmth of a woolen cloak, its thick fabric a comforting shield against the cold. Outside, snowdrifts deepened, their edges etched like frosty swords against the moonlit sky, and the wind howled through the eaves, causing our thatch to creak and groan as if it too felt the weight of the tempest. I carefully stirred the simmering stew, its fragrance wafting up from the cauldron like a promise of sustenance. As my wife slept fitfully by the fire, her dark hair tangled with a few stray strands of mistletoe, its tiny berries clinging to her forehead like tears. As I hunched over the wooden workbench, the flickering light danced across my face, illuminating the lines etched into my skin from years of hard labor, and the tired eyes that had seen their fair share of winter's darkness. The crackling fire in the hearth cast a warm glow on the rough-hewn stone walls, but it was little comfort against the biting cold that seeped through the wooden shutters like a chill wind. My hands moved with a precision born of repetition, as I carefully mended the wooden plow, each joint and crack smoothed out by the patient hand of time. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth wafted up from the hearth, mingling with the sweet tang of onions and herbs that simmered in the cauldron on the stovetop, creating a fragrant cocktail that filled my lungs and lifted my spirits. I worked in silence, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old wooden beam or the distant howl of the wind outside. But as I sanded down the last scratch, a small smile crept onto my face, and for an instant I forgot about the long days ahead and let myself be lost in the simple joy of creation. As I trudged through the knee-deep snow, my thoughts strayed to the day's tasks, the long hours of labor that lay ahead like an unyielding mountain range. The biting wind whipped across the frozen landscape, its icy fingers stinging my cheeks as I worked, but I pressed on, my breath visible in the chill air. Our fields would need tending, the snow-encrusted earth shoveled and turned to coax forth a new crop from the cold, dark womb of winter. The wooden handle of my shovel scraped against the frozen ground, releasing tiny geysers of ice crystals into the air as I worked. I envisioned the warm light of our hearth, where a pot of simmering broth waited, its fragrance a tantalizing promise of sustenance to come. It was a never-ending cycle, one that seemed both endless and inevitable. Yet somehow, in this quiet moment, it felt almost manageable, like a puzzle waiting to be solved by the patient hand of time itself. I wrapped my fingers around the handle of my tunic, its woolen fabric a comforting presence against the biting cold, and felt a deep, abiding sense of purpose, born of the cold, hard earth beneath my feet and the slow, steady beat of our rural heart, which pulsed like a warm ember in the darkness.